Hello, this is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon in 12.5 degrees of Gemini, which will be exact on June 3rd at 6:02 a.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, and 11:02 a.m. London time. So, of course, a new moon is always the beginning of a new moon phase. And it is an introverted time. It's a time where we're really being invited to go within so that we can align ourselves with what's coming up for the next 28 days. Sort of like a preparation for what's to come, what's unfolding in the next 28 days. And so we'll also, of course, talk about setting intentions in connection with that, because the new moon is a really potent, wonderful time to set intentions for the next moon cycle. And we'll do that towards the end of the video, so stay tuned. And also, please feel free to take advantage of the timestamps that I have added to the description part of the video, in case you want to watch the video in shorter sequences, because sometimes we don't have always the time to do it all in one go. Now, one major thing to note with this new moon chart is that we have 5 planets in the signs over which they rule. Now, this means that these planets feel very much at home and more empowered in those signs. So the planets that we're talking about here is Mercury, which is also the ruler of the new moon, Venus, which is currently in Taurus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. Neptune, which also happens to be stationing and is therefore exalted, making its vibrational spin a little bit louder for us during the time of the new moon. So with a station phase, there's something that's in our face in regards to that planet's energy. So in this case, it's Neptune. And we will feel this for quite a long time, for about 4 weeks. So I already talked in great detail about this in our last monthly forecasting forum. So feel free to watch or get the video presentation of this webinar if you haven't seen it yet. We applied Neptune's movement and station phase directly to our own birth charts to see how this is going to impact each one of us. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment as well. But first, let me just talk a little bit about the Gemini influence for this new moon. Okay, now Gemini, for the next 4 weeks, we have this Gemini influence. And so we're asked to connect with others and share our little hearts out, because Gemini loves to connect and talk and share and process information. It's the archetype of curiosity, actually, and communication in all of its forms, and mental connections. So it really represents the development of language and intelligence in us. And it also represents the ability to adapt and relate to our immediate environment. So where we currently live, the people we interact on a day-to-day basis. So it's not deep connections, it's more superficial connections. Now, this is a very busy energy because it's all about staying in movement, processing and sharing information. So it's also very much about collecting information. So we are invited to look at our mental programming and conditioned mind, to see what needs to be released and to see what new thought structures we might want to create in its place. So that's sort of the task of what we're looking at for the next 4 weeks. Now, Gemini is asking us to stay in motion, to think about all that we'll need to know in order to move forward and to connect and share ourselves with others. So here are some questions you can ask yourself for this new moon. What motivates me to learn? And when I talk to myself about sharing or processing information, what do I typically say to myself? And what do I say to myself about being connected to others? And about my intellectual capacities? What are what's my inner dialogue that goes on about that? And so that's just something we kind of can contemplate about for the next 4 weeks. And it's not something where we have to answer the question right away, but we want to kind of allow ourselves to sit with those questions and just let them have them in the background of our mind as we're moving through this Gemini new moon energy. And if you want to have access to the new moon questions from this video, because there are going to be several more of these, if you want to have access to those in writing, and also to the full moon videos that I provide every month, feel free to check out the various levels of membership that are available on my website at astrologercoach.com. Now, if you're already a member, please go to the blog page of my website and then look for tags. You can look for the tag New Moon Questions, and within that New Moon Questions tag, you will get to my New Moon in Gemini article. Now, you can also look for articles, and then you will also get to the New Moon in Gemini article, which I will post probably around May 31st, something like that. Now, let's go back to the new moon. The spiritual goal of Gemini is the development of perception, thought, and communication. So we're therefore invited to become aware of all the new connections that are created in the brain with each new thought or memory that we keep pulling up. And the more we think a particular thought, or the more we pull up a particular memory, the deeper those pathways become. So it's very important that we are conscious of that and that we're aware of that, so that we're not choosing to pull up thoughts and memories that are not in service to our evolution or to our development in this lifetime. So what you can ask yourself here is, what mental paths do I keep heading down, even though I know I don't need to go there anymore? So, and that requires paying attention to our process, paying attention to our inner dialogue, paying attention to, when we go into a memory and why and for how long. And so another question you can ask here is, what might curiosity do for me when listening to myself? And this is very important, because curiosity is a really wonderful tool. It's a wonderful tool in connecting with ourselves, with other people, with life, with the world. And it's when we are in curiosity, we're in open-mindedness. And when we're in open-mindedness, we're not in judgment. And so that's valuable, because judgment always creates a shutting down in terms of our own process, whether that's a thinking process or an emotional process, or even a spiritual energetic process. Whereas curiosity keeps us open. So our heart stays open, our mind stays open. We're in a state of openness. And so that's why this is very important to remember. Now, how about when I connect with other people? What might curiosity do for me then, right? So these are all just some questions that you can either meditate on, or you can journal on, or you can just sit with these questions for these next couple of weeks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is in its own sign at the time of the new moon, and is therefore exalted. And so social interactions are really important to us right now with this Mercury placement. And so we're definitely invited to remain curious and focus on listening as well as sharing. And this is important with Gemini. We got to go both ways, right? We got to go into a place of sharing, but we also got to go into a place of being able to listen. Now, Mercury is symbolized as the messenger of the heavens, and as such, it remains neutral. So delivering information without an agenda, it's merely just about bringing information, right? So we may recall the saying, don't shoot the messenger, right? Which means that if somebody delivers information or delivers some kind of good or bad news, often it's connected to bad news, right? It's not about the person that delivers it that we need to have a query with. It's about just being able to take in the information without needing to attach it to anything, right? So this is a good prompt that reminds us to process information, share it, and keep an open mind. So bear in mind that when thoughts move through consciousness, they are neither good or bad, but are simply information coming either from our conditioning, which means anything that you absorbed between the age of 0 and 7. This is where most conditioning gets solidified, or it's information that comes from outside sources. So things that we have soaked up either through TV, the news, internet, books, music, things that people have said to us, and so on and so on, right? So ask yourself here, if that were true, that information is neither good nor bad, it's simply coming from conditioning or outside sources. If that were true, what might I choose to do with the information that comes into consciousness when a thought passes through? And I really want you to think of your own thinking as that. It's very easy to think of our own thinking as, this is my thought, this is mine, this is the information that comes through between, our frontal lobes here. That is, I am producing this information. But it's much more complex than that. Information actually arises in consciousness. We're not actually doing anything to think our thoughts. And the way to know that that's true is to just check with yourself to see, do you know what your next thought is going to be? Because if you were to think it, then you would know that, right? So just check right now for a moment. Just check in with your thinking body. Do you know what your next thought is going to be? And very often we experience sort of like a silence when we ask that question. So that indicates that thinking arises in consciousness, that it's not actually something that we're doing. It just comes up. And so therefore it's very important to kind of see, like, what do we do with the information that comes up, that arises in our consciousness as a thought passes through. Now, another aspect in this new moon chart is Jupiter. Jupiter is also in its own sign in Sagittarius, and Jupiter opposes the new moon and Mercury in Gemini. And you could say that Jupiter is sort of like opposing the midpoint between the new moon and Mercury, because the new moon is in 12.5 degrees, Mercury is in 27 degrees, and Jupiter is in 20 degrees. So you can see how, it's kind of like right the middle of that opposition connects to the new moon and Mercury. Now, this asks us to balance our capacity to share and process information against our ability to connect to a larger truth. See, Jupiter is very much about the larger truth of things. It's about our perception of things. It's about the bigger picture. It's about being able to see beyond the facts and to help us see, what else is going on, more connected to like a bigger view, almost like a life philosophy in a sense. Now, for the next 2 weeks, what you want to ask yourself here with this combination is, what do I say to myself about life and its impact on me? And what thoughts keep coming up that have defined me in the past? And where do I need to listen with greater intent? Because with that Jupiter opposition to these Gemini planets, we might love to talk more than we like to listen. So where do I need to listen with greater intent? Where do I need to speak up? With Jupiter in Sagittarius, we're being invited to speak our truth. So where do I need to speak up? Am I coming from a place of already always listening? And in other words, that means, do I really hear what is being said? Or am I merely pretending to listen so that I can speak and move on? Or that I think, oh, I already know that. Let me move on, right? So sometimes with a strong Jupiter like this, we have a tendency to be in a place of like, oh, I know this already. Oh, you're not telling me anything new. Or I know better than that, right? Sometimes we're also not listening because we're like, oh, that's BS, what you're talking about. I know what I know is more correct, is more right. So we have to pay attention to that, because that's a bit of a trap for ourselves, because we tend to not grow and evolve when we do that, and we tend to separate ourselves from other people. So do I really hear what is being said, or am I merely pretending to listen so I can speak and move on? It's a great question. So feel free to journal on that, or to just allow yourself to see if that's showing up in your life for the next 28 days. Now, Neptune in Pisces is exalted because of its station phase, like I mentioned at the beginning already, and because it's in its own sign as well. And so Neptune squares the new moon and Jupiter in Sagittarius. And this creates a T-square with Neptune as the focus point. And so this might create feelings of disconnect or restlessness, because we're really being pushed in a lot of different directions. It's a very busy energy, and we're sort of like probably overthinking things a little bit. We're overdoing things. And Neptune kind of suffers a little bit, because Neptune says, wait a second, I need to go within. I need to, be in touch with my higher self, with my soul self, with my intuitive self. How can I make time for that? How can I rest more, right? So Neptune wants to be heard, or wants to be connected with. And because of this strong Jupiter Gemini or Sagittarius Gemini opposition, we might have a hard time with that. So what you want to ask yourself here is, where does the desire for knowing what's next drown out the intuitive voice that knows and understands the power and love the present moment contains? And this is very important. This question is really powerful, because the present moment is all we got. It's where we have our power. It's where we have our control. It's where we have a sense of connectedness in the present moment. You can only be fully connected in the present moment. But of course, the Sagittarian Gemini polarity is very much about, moving around. It's a very movable, adaptable energy that asks us to keep moving from the past to the present to the future to the this and the that and the that and the next thing. So as you can see, this is going to be challenging for Neptune. So the solution with all T-squares is to focus on the empty leg of that T-square, which in this case is Virgo. So having a daily practice that brings us closer to ourselves, our divine selves, will be really essential for the next 4 weeks. This is very important. So ask yourself here, is what might a daily practice of kindness towards myself look like? So a daily practice of kindness towards myself, right? And this is important because, we need to learn to be kind with ourselves in order to be able to accomplish everything that we want to accomplish, to be able to connect with ourselves fully in a human way. Kindness is a key component, and it's very much connected to Neptune. Kindness is very much connected to that. So another question you can ask yourself here: how might 5% more compassion support my relationship with the inner divine? Again, very important, because Neptune wants us to go within, wants us to connect on a intuitive sensing level. It's our feelings, our sensing, our intuition that is important for us to connect with in order to really be able to have access to what is so, what is true. It is what really helps us to be connected to our higher selves, to our soul selves. So how might 5% more compassion support my relationship with my inner divine? And as many of you know who've watched my videos before, the reason why I use 5% in my questions very often is because we don't want to overwhelm ourselves by saying 100%, because 100% compassion is something that puts us under pressure. It's something that demands something of us, perfectionism. And so this is not about perfectionism. This is about allowing ourselves to open up, to become more connected with our higher self. And so 5% is a good amount to just create that opening. Now, what might a morning practice of visualization of my day do for me? So if I sat down every morning just for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes, doesn't even matter how long, but just a couple of minutes each day to visualize my day and to put feeling into it, to put excitement into it, or to put beauty into it, or love into it, or compassion or kindness into it, but to really just visualize your day and to see how you'd like that to look or unfold. And it's not about becoming attached to the visualization. It's merely placing an intent for the day that allows you to start the day on a really good footing, and to allow you to include that Neptune energy into your day. So what might a morning practice of visualizing my day do for me? So just think about that and maybe experiment and see how that might support you. Now, how could I inspire myself to come from a place of acceptance and understanding when dealing with my work or health routines? And that again would be Neptune, bringing Neptune into your day-to-day work, into dealing with your health routines, right? Whatever that means for you. We all have different types of health routines depending on where we are on the scale of health, right? So how could I inspire myself to come from a place of acceptance and understanding when dealing with my work or health routines? And how might making a list support me in being more present? And this is something that I really love doing because I have Mars in Pisces. And so I sometimes get a little overwhelmed, like most of us who have planets in Pisces, we sometimes can get overwhelmed. And in order to get more grounded in the present moment and in my heart, I make a list. I write everything down, everything that is supposed to happen for me that day or that week or that month, whatever it may be. I write it down just so that I can start to reconnect with my heart again and be more present with my energy body, my physical body, my emotional body. Because that list means that it's in existence somewhere and that I don't have to worry about it. Now, what about discerning or prioritizing, right? So that's another thing that we can do with either our lists, or we can do it just in general in our day-to-day routines. How can we be more discerning and prioritizing? And when I talk about discerning and prioritizing, I also want you to think about all the daily things that you do. And this is not just your day-to-day work that I'm talking about. I'm also talking about, when you watch TV, when you watch the news, when you look at stuff on the internet, when you interact with people, with the social media, when you interact with people via email or text, how can you bring in some discernment and prioritizing for yourself so that you can reconnect to that heart energy? What works for you, what doesn't, what serves you, what doesn't serve you when it comes to wanting to connect to that intuitive heart place. And is it possible that discerning and prioritizing would create an inner calm? Just sit with that. Again, you don't have to answer any of these questions right away. It's more about being open to letting the answer come to you rather than attempting to answer actively, right? It's more about a feminine process rather than a masculine process. Now, as mentioned earlier, Neptune in Pisces is slowing down as it prepares to come to a halt and starts its retrograde phase on June 21st. So this preparation amplifies the call to release whatever is no longer in the best interest of all concerned. And Neptune's energy is very strong for the next month. So with both its higher and lower vibrations becoming more clearer for us, how do we connect to Neptune's vibrations, whether they're light or dense, high or low, whatever you want to call it. So this helps us connect more fully to those energies as they exist within us. And it shows us where we need to either embrace them more fully or connect to them in a healthier way. So in a way that doesn't involve getting lost in the murky, lower or denser vibration of Neptune's expression, which would be things like escapism, addiction, denial, illusion, things like that, right? So what you can ask yourself here is, what is my relationship to my own imagination? How do I use it? Do I tend to imagine worst case scenarios or visualize what I wish to create? What is my relationship to my intuition? Again, another Neptune quality, right? Intuition. If I get quiet enough, can I catch its subtle voice? Very often we don't quite know what intuition really is, or how we access it or how we connect with it. And some of us do better with this than others, right? I mean, some of us are very good at it, and then some of us are not so good at it. And the reason why we're not so good at this is because of our conditioning, because of how we were raised. There was never really a role model, unless you were very lucky to have a role model like that. But most of us were not lucky to have a role model that would show us how to connect to our own intuition, how to trust it. And very often, we actually had the opposite experience when we actually did trust our intuition, that somebody would come and say to us, "Oh, what are you talking about? That's not true." And would kind of negate what actually was an intuitive connection to ourselves. And so then we start doubting, we start not connecting to our intuition, we start not trusting it. And so this is important. If I get quiet enough, can I catch the subtle voice? Because intuition is subtle. It's very subtle. So when I hear it, can I take that moment to really heed what it says and then trust it? Again, very important to allow ourselves to practice trusting our intuitiveness or observing when our intuition steered us in the right direction, and to trust that in the future. So who has the last word in your life? Your mind or your heart? So that's something to also observe. Neither good nor bad. It's not about judgment. It's more about just observe in your day-to-day life. If you think about what most is more dominant in your life, what has the last word? Your mind or your heart? Or maybe it's balanced. Maybe there's both, right? So as best as you can, simply observe. This is not about doing the right or wrong thing, but about becoming more aware of how we are connected to this energy. And this is really what Neptune wants us to contemplate during the station phase, or wants us to pay attention to. So during the Neptune retrograde, we'll get a chance to connect to this from within, and to feel its vibration more internally. But again, for a more in-depth look into the Neptune Station phase in connection with our own birth charts, feel free to watch the last forecasting forum and to purchase this 110-minute webinar. Click on the link below this video. There's going to be a link that I'm going to list. Or you can also go to my website, to astrologercoach.com, and hover over the Services tab on the top right-hand corner and click on Webinars. So you can, once you hover on that Services tab, there will more tabs will show up, and then you can go to Webinars there. And you'll see when you get to Webinars, Neptune Station webinar. Now, if you're already a star or superstar member of my online community, then please check your email for the link to this webinar. It was sent out to you on May 21st. Now, if you joined us after May 21st, then unfortunately that's not going to be available to you yet. But anybody who joined us before May 21st will have access to that webinar for free. Now, back to the new moon chart. Mars in Cancer conjuncts the North Node and opposes Saturn and the South Node in Capricorn. So the alignment to the North Node indicates that we are invited to focus on self-care and take actions that support our emotional connections with others. Now, what you can ask yourself is, what actions do I still need to take so I can feel supported in my endeavors? And what needs to happen in some of these areas of my life when it comes to household projects, when it comes to family, when it comes to self-care, maybe even when it comes to real estate? And then what does receiving emotional support look like to me? What does that look like? Because, we all have a different relationship to emotional support. Some of us don't have a relationship to it at all. But if we think about it, what does receiving emotional support look like to me personally? Like, is that something that I feel comfortable with? Is it something that I'm very comfortable with? How does it look when people actually give me emotional support? What happens in my body? What happens in my mind when someone is offering emotional support to me? And then what does providing emotional support look like? So some of us are much better at providing it than receiving it. And some of us are better at receiving it than providing it. So I just want you to, and it's not good or bad, it's just sometimes we're on more of a scale in that direction than in a scale in that direction. So just think about that for yourself and see where you're at on that scale, and what does providing emotional support look like, or what could it look like if you're on the scale of not being so good at that. And what am I willing to fight for? Mars is all about, what do I want to put my energy into? What am I willing to fight for when it comes to, family, when it comes to household projects, when it comes to my self-care? Again, same areas of life. When it comes to nurturing myself or being in alignment with myself, what am I willing to fight for? And so the other part of this aspect is the opposition to Saturn and the South Node, which invites us to find a balance between our long-term goals and nurturing connections at home or something that feels familiar. So when we push too hard or too fast, it doesn't always get us the result we want. So it's really time to slow down a little and catch our breath. And Cancer, Mars in Cancer, that's very much about, taking a breath before we jump into action. Really checking in with our feeling body before we jump into action. And then, of course, the opposition to Saturn says, slow down and pay attention to how you're doing this, rather than sprinting, just walk at a fast pace rather than sprinting. Now, Mars last aligned with Saturn back on April 2nd, 2018. So whenever there's an opposition between two planets, we want to look back to when was the conjunction, because that was when something got started at the time of the conjunction. So think back to that time, spring 2018. What began? What seeds were planted? What commitments did you make? How far have you come since then, since spring of 2018? In other words, what has emerged since spring of 2018 in regards to career, long-term goals, public image, becoming an expert at something, or being an authority figure in your field? And the reason why I'm saying it like this is because the Mars-Saturn conjunction was in Capricorn. So what got seeded at that time was very much in connection to Capricorn things: career, long-term goals, public image, authority, expert, right? So, so now with this opposition, you're more aware of what you have or haven't accomplished since then. So the question here is, do you like what you see? And is there room for more integrations in any of these areas when it comes to the Capricorn energy and when it comes to the Cancer energy? Is there room for more integration between the outer and the inner? Career, home, right? Okay, so let's talk about the last aspect in this new moon chart very briefly. Venus in Taurus, also in her own sign, trines Pluto in Capricorn at the time of the new moon. So this indicates that we now learn to appreciate the important people in our lives, and our value system has the ability to transform and evolve over the next couple of weeks, and in a way that we are going to feel more empowered. So work that we have done in the past may pay off now, and we're able to manage our finances better. Yoo-hoo. I think that's a good news for most of us. And with also more attention to sustainability, planning, and strategy. So when it comes to our finances, we're really more capable right now to pay attention to how can we make something last? How can we plan better so that our finances are in better shape? And how can we strategize so that we can, make this not just something that's true in the moment, but something that is true for a longer period of time. Now, the other part is that we're also eliminating anything that no longer serves us. This could be in connection to things where we felt disempowered in the past around our finances, or something connected to our talents or self-worth. Could also be something that we're letting go of fears connected to long-term goals, or building a sustainable future for ourselves, or fears around what is the world coming to, right? So anything that no longer serves us, we're ready to let it go. And so we also tend to want to connect on a deeper level with ourselves, with others, especially when it comes to our long-term goals. We want to connect to something deeper, something that's more authentic and meaningful to us. So what you can ask yourself here is, what am I feeling drawn to on a deep instinctual level? What deep desires are surfacing, especially in relationship to my talents or my long-term goals? What values can I no longer compromise for myself? And what if inner confidence met emotional authenticity? So inner confidence would be that Venus in Taurus, and emotional authenticity would be that Pluto in Capricorn, right? So what if inner confidence met emotional authenticity? And could I be open to the people, places, and things that can make this meeting a reality? I think that's a beautiful question. So again, just allow yourself to work with these questions, especially if they resonate with you. If a question doesn't resonate with you at all, you don't have to, obviously, you don't have to work with any of them. But I would advise to work with the questions that pull you the most, that are the most juicy for you. And actually, this could be in both directions, in a direction of attraction and in a direction of repulsion. Another thing I want to mention is, for a more detailed description of this Venus-Pluto trine, please feel free to read my weekly forecast for June 2nd or on June 2nd. If you don't have access to my weekly forecasts yet, you may want to join my online community. Feel free to check out all the various levels of membership, as I mentioned already earlier. And just please keep in mind that if I'm still offering amazing discounts for all my membership levels, some of which will soon expire. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, to sum it all up for this new moon, We are seeking balance on many levels here with these oppositions, right? Internally, externally, and as best as you can, remain curious, open-minded, and adaptable for the next 28 days. Just trust yourself. You already have what it takes. Your inner knowingness is ready for you whenever you are, and maybe you were already there with it, so that's great too. And just ask yourself, am I just my mind, or am I more than that? Am I more than just my mind? And if I'm more than just my mind, what is beyond the mind? What else would be there? And what might I discover if I stay open to being inspired by life, rather than focusing on all the bad news and denser vibrational thoughts that come through? So let me pose that last question one more time. What might I discover if I stay open to being inspired by life, rather than focusing on all the bad news or denser vibrations that come through in form of thoughts sometimes? What do I still need to release to be ready to receive my future? And how have I overburdened myself? What might lighten my load? Again, these are fantastic questions to journal with if you feel inclined to do so, if that's your thing. Now, if you do have an ascendant, career point, or personal planets in 10 to 15 degrees of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces, then you're definitely going to feel the impact of this new moon more strongly. And for those of you who don't have planets or points in those degrees and signs, take a look at your natal chart. If you have your birth chart, take a look at it and just look to see, where does 12.5 degrees of Gemini land in your birth chart? Because the house placement of this new moon will indicate which area of your life is most impacted for the next 28 days. And you can also check out my 30-minute class, How to Read My Birth Chart. If you don't know how to look that up in your own chart, you can get free access to this class via my homepage at astrologercoach.com. Just scroll down all the way down to where you see a box that says free class, and you just click on that, and then you can sign up for that class. Now, before we talk about intention settings, I would love to just very briefly mention what we will cover in the next forecasting forum that will be live on June 18th. For those of you who may want to join, we will talk in more detail about Chiron's movements, which is the wounded healer. And Chiron is stationing in late June until late July, so for a whole month. So we'll talk about that in relationship to our own birth charts. And also Mercury's second retrograde phase of the year in Leo Cancer. So we'll talk about that as well, and also see how is that going to apply to our own charts. That starts in late June and early July. If you want to join us live, or if you want to get the MP4 video presentation of this webinar, feel free to register. And also for more info, you can click on the link below this video. There will be another link for that. Or you can also go to my homepage, to astrologercoach.com, and scroll down to the forecasting forum countdown. And there you can click on register now. And if you are already a Star Superstar member, you will be automatically signed up for these forums, and you will receive 2 emails. One with a link to join the webinar live, and another one with a link to download it as a video recording. So watch out for those emails and check your junk mail if you don't see it in your inbox. And if you don't see it in your junk mail either, then please email me right away. Okay? You will receive the first email you receive on the day of the webinar. So on June 18th, you'll receive the first email, and the second email you'll either receive the evening of June 18th or the next day. Now, let's talk about intentions. So for this new moon cycle, the best and most potent time to set our intentions is always right after the new moon becomes exact, not before. And it's also best done when there's no moonward of course phase. So we want to avoid moon void, of course, phases for our intention setting process. So this month we have 2 periods that are great for setting intentions. The first one is anytime between 6:02 a.m. on June 3rd and 11:42 a.m. on June 4th, so the next day. And if you aren't able to do this or to set your intention during that time period, you can wait 35 minutes on June 4th and then set them between 12:17 p.m. on June 4th and 6:02 a.m. the next day on June 5th. So all of these times that I just listed are Eastern Daylight Savings Time, which is the time zone connected to New York City. Okay? So if you live in a different time zone other than Eastern Daylight Savings Time, US East Coast time, then you can either convert the time zones into the time zone that you live in, or you can, if that's not your thing, then I suggest joining my Facebook fan page or following me on Twitter, or you can do both, because I will be posting reminders on June 3rd throughout the day and June 4th later in the day until June 5th in the morning to let you know when it is the best time to set your intentions. So whenever you see those posts on Twitter or on my Facebook fan page, you know right now is a good time to set my intentions and you don't have to worry about converting anything. You just do it right there and then. All right, so for more information about setting intentions, go to my website. I have an article that I wrote about how to do this. So just go to my blog page and then look for astrology articles or look for the tag New Moon Intentions. And to sign up for my free monthly newsletter, you can do that via my homepage at astrologercoach.com, or you can send us an email to info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line and you'll be added to that particular mailing list. My monthly newsletter is usually special offers that I have, my new moon videos, any announcements that I'm making about courses or retreats or webinars or anything like that. Okay, now have a fantastic new moon. If you have any general questions about the new moon, you can always feel free to reach out to me via email at info@astrologercoach.com. If you have any personal questions that involve me pulling up your birth chart, then I will ask you to book a reading with me at astrologercoach.com, or any questions connected to what's coming up within the next 30 days or so. You can join the next monthly forecasting forum on June 18th. I will answer personal questions during the webinar as well. All right, so my members will see me again in 2 weeks around the time of the full moon, so we can look at how far we've come since setting our new moon intentions. And everyone else will see me in about 4 weeks around the time of the new moon, or before the time of the new moon, with the next new moon video. So have a fantastic time, have a fantastic month, have a fantastic 2 weeks, and I'm astrologer coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.